I'm Dr. Andrew Allen from Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls, and that was the second TMEA All-State Saxophone Etude for the 2018-2019 school year. It's what we often call the slow etude, the lyrical etude, the pretty etude, and it holds up to those statements pretty well. It is a beautiful piece of music, and all the time that you're working on this and thinking about this, I want you to be thinking of it as a piece of music. Not just an etude where you get to show off your technique, but you get to show off your musicianship and your musical smarts on this piece. So I want you to think about that from day one. First thing to think about on this, you must have a counting system. You're counting the eighth note throughout. Every bar has 8 beats. And there are a lot of things that look very difficult, but if you have a counting system, they're not very difficult. Nothing goes faster than 4 notes per beat at 80. You can do that. If you can do the other two etudes, you can definitely do that. You have to have a counting system. If it helps, you may want to put little tick marks for where the beats are so that you can keep track, especially in the early stages, but you have to be able to count this. I would say count any little phraselet before you start working on the technique, because otherwise it's going to turn into a mess. If you don't use your metronome, if you don't count, you will not do well on this. Follow the same rules that I mentioned in the first etude and then I'll mention in the third etude. Small chunks with your metronome, start slow, move up in small increments, and add to that, and I would even say on maybe the other 2 etudes, be able to count it with the metronome, and that's going to help you immensely. Moving on from that, your sound is of utmost importance all the time, not just in this etude, but in everything you play in your entire life. But we get to hear your sound a little bit more here. Now, you have to play pretty in the other 2 as well, but you get some time on notes. You get to show off your sound, show off your vibrato, which we'll talk about in a moment. But if you need help in improving your sound, I would point you again to my YouTube video, Improving Saxophone Sound, that you can find on my page. I give you a lot of pointers there, but the biggest pointer that I can give is twofold. Number 1, do a lot of listening to great saxophonists. Listen to people like Tim McAllister, Joe Luloff, people like Clifford Lehman, people like Jonathan Nickel. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. But get those beautiful sounds in your ear so that you know what to play like. Number 2, the more that you work on long tones, the better. I mentioned this in the other video on tone, but I would recommend here getting a hold of a book called The Saxophonist Workbook by Larry Teal. And Mr. Teal included many exercises on improving sound, improving intonation, articulation. It's a great resource to have that you can work out of and really improve yourself on. It also covers vibrato, and if you need some additional help, I do have another YouTube video on saxophone vibrato and how to start working on it. If you haven't done vibrato yet, as soon as you start feeling confident in your sound and in your intonation, I would go ahead and add vibrato into the mix. If you're confident in your vibrato ability, hopefully you notice that my vibrato wasn't the same throughout. I didn't use the same speed, the same vibrations per beat. I varied it according to the needs of the piece. And I hope that's something that you're thinking about as well if you're already proficient at vibrato. A few other things to think about. We have very long lines in this piece. And it's necessary to be able to shape these long lines with lots of nice dynamics. Dynamics are not, by any stretch of the imagination, something that you can do without in this piece. You have to do the dynamics, and it's not something that you can add later on. You can't learn the notes and rhythms and then go back and add the dynamics later. It's just not going to work. It's not going to sound good. Instead, you must begin learning those as you learn the notes. In addition, with your phrasing, make sure that you're taking nice big breaths, just like we talked about in the first etude. Let that lower jaw come off the mouthpiece. Take a very large silent breath whenever possible to give you the fuel that you need through this lovely etude. A few other things to think about. Legato fingers are of the utmost importance in this piece. Make sure that you're blowing a steady stream of air throughout. Make sure that there's no excess tension or clackiness in your fingers, because again, this translates into your sound. We can hear when you're very tense. We can hear breakup of the sound. So again, work on the most fluid, relaxed fingers that you can. You may want to focus on your elbow or your forearm. If you can feel tension there, there's tension in your fingers. So that's something to be mindful of. And yet another reason to go about slow, piece by piece practicing, because that's going to become very evident, and it's going to be something that you can isolate very easily if you do that. few specific things. Now, if any of you still use 1 and 1 B flat, eliminate that from your vocabulary. It is next to useless. We have lots of B flats in this piece. None of them should you play with 1 and 1 B flat. Instead, I would recommend what I call bis B flat, what everybody calls bis B flat. It's your first finger on the B, and with that same first finger, you're going to hit that little itty bitty key right below the B, and you're going to play that with the same finger. That's bis B flat. Side B flat, you play an A, and add that lowest side key in your right hand, side B flat. So I'm going to give you some recommendations on some fingerings to use throughout, and the largest amount of them are which B flat fingering to use in which scenario, so just hang with me here. Measure 1 throughout, I would use the bis B flat. It's a lot easier to do that leaping. Whenever you're leaping, by and large, I would use bis. Whenever you're going step by step, especially if C's involved, I'd use side B flat. Measure 3, take a look at those graces. Hopefully you noticed when I played that a moment ago that those graces happen before the note, or before the beat, rather. The E flat is going to happen right on the beat. The graces aren't a big deal. They aren't the focus of attention. The E flat is. Just those other 3 graces are commenting on the E flat. And they're going to happen before the beat. E flat happens on the beat. And also the graces are never accented in this piece at all, ever. Measure 4, we've got that little trill from A to a B flat. Unless otherwise indicated, a trill is always going to be up to the next note in the key. So this goes from an A to a B flat. I would use my side B flat. Sorry, get a little spin there. Now, you probably noticed I didn't trill flat out the whole time. I sped up into it, slowed down into it, and there was a little pause where I was just playing the A before I moved on to the graces. You should do the same thing. Now, you can't leave out graces. You can't leave out trills in this piece. I hear that every once in a while. You can't do it. They're part of the piece. You have to plan. So, maybe you want to break this up. Maybe you want to play without the graces, maybe without the trill, until you get the rhythm right. Then go and just maybe add the trill. Get the pacing of the trill right, get the rhythm right. Then maybe do the same thing, but leave out the trill, add the graces. Once you're comfortable both ways, then do them both together. Keep counting throughout, keep the pacing the same, you'll be fine. I would, in measure 4, I would use the side B flat until I get to that little pickup at the end, and then I'd use bis. Measure 5, use bis. Measure 6, use your side B flat in beat 3. Use your bis B flat in beat 7. Measure 7, I would use the bis B flat in beat 1. I'd use the side B flat in beat 7. Measure 16, use side B flat there. Measure 10, I'd use side B flat there. Can't read my own writing. Measure 11, I'd use bis. Same thing with the trill there. Pace it the same way. You don't want to go flat out. You want to build and then bring it off and have a little pause where you're just playing the E flat before you move on to the graces. And also there, you can just leave your pinky down if that's the most comfortable thing. It'll cut down on some finger flying. If you just go from the E flat to the F, because it goes to the F, that trill, and just leave your pinky down on the E flat key. Measure 12, I'd use the bis key. Measure 13, I'd start with bis, go to side, B flat. Measure 15, after you play that low B, just keep your pinky down on the low B key, and you can play that A flat. Instead of having to shift your pinky, you can just keep it down on that low B key, and that A flat will come out. It raises the G sharp A flat key, no problem. So just leave it there. Measure 21, I'd use bis. And then the grace on the D is another great opportunity to use that alternate D that we talked about in the first etude, that little D that uses the middle palm key. I would use that there. Measure 24, in beat 1, I'd use the bis key, the bis fingering for B flat. In beat 4, I'd use the side B flat. The rest of the bar, I'd use the bis. Measure 25, I'd use side B flat. Measure 26, I'd use bis B flat. Measure 27, I'd use the bis B flat, and really watch out for those E flat, the 2-octave leap there. Make sure that those line up, that they're in tune with each other. And then finally, in measure 28, I'd use bis B flat. I hope that all of those tips and techniques have helped you. If you have any comments or concerns, please get a hold of me, andrew.allen@mwsu.edu, or get a hold of me through my website, alansax.com. I look forward to speaking with you and working with some of you, and as always, good luck.